Back in 1809, a British diplomat by the name of Mount Stuart Elphinstone met with an elderly Afghan tribal leader in Peshawar, trying to convince him of the benefits of a centralised government. The leader responded with, quote, "We are content with discord, we are content with alarms, we are content with blood, but we will never be content with a master." More than 200 years on, the statement still holds true. Afghanistan is one of the few countries around the world that has never been successfully conquered. It's managed to thwart an impressive list of significantly more sizable foreign powers, from Genghis Khan's Mongolia all the way through to the Soviet bloc and most recently the United States. Despite being a rather impoverished country with little military strength, it really has never been content with a master. But to understand Afghanistan's position, we first have to look at its geography. You see, Afghanistan is a geographic fortress. The eastern part of the country is entirely mountainous, and the Hindu Kush range, with peaks soaring well above 20,000 feet, bisects the country. What isn't mountains is largely arid desert, and therefore any settlers who rely on agriculture are restricted to the few and far between river valleys. Because of its geography, invasion routes are limited and tricky to navigate. Defenders can easily block off key passages through the mountains, such as the Panjshir Valley and the infamous Harbour Pass, which formed part of the early Silk Road and served as a historical trade link between the Indian subcontinent and Central Asia. Even though foreign invaders have struggled to rule over Afghanistan, so too has any indigenous Afghan government. The mountainous terrain makes it near impossible for Kabul to exert control over the various peripheral states, along with their different tribes and ethnic groups. There's little sense of regional identity, and when Afghans do interact, it usually results in conflict. But to say that Afghanistan hasn't been conquered isn't to say that it can't be overrun. The simple fact that Kabul can't exert control over the region, and with ethnic tribes frequently fighting amongst themselves, there's very little coordinated border defense, which means that foreign armies almost always find easy ways into the country. The fighting spirit of Afghanistan exists in the hills, not in the cities, which we'll discuss more later. A foreign army looking to invade may therefore experience a deceptive calm before seeing any significant resistance. But it's not just the terrain. The modern political borders of Afghanistan as we see them today are almost entirely meaningless and aren't at all indicative of the country's true population and strength. Back in 1893 and before the creation of Pakistan in 1947, an Englishman by the name of Mortimer Durand was tasked with drawing a border between Afghanistan and British India. His only instructions were to ensure that strategic points such as the Khojak and Harbour passes, along with important cities such as Peshawar and Quetta, now in modern-day Pakistan, fell on the Indian side of the border. The problem was that the line ran straight through the heartland of Afghanistan's largest ethnic group, the Pashtun. If you look at any map today, you'll see a clear border separating the states of Afghanistan and Pakistan. But for the people who live here, no such border truly exists. There's been many cases in history where sloppy borders have been drawn by great powers with little regard for the ethnic groups inhabiting the land. But nowhere have these borders been more deceptive than with Afghanistan. You see, some 25 million people who are forced to live on Pakistan's side of the border are ethnically, culturally, and religiously Afghan, and their sense of identity often transcends random lines on the map. Afghanistan has never officially recognised the Durand Line as a legitimate border with Pakistan, and territorial disputes about who the land belongs to are still ongoing today. Another major problem with the Durand Line is that the movement of armed militants, insurgents, and weapons across the border is difficult to stop, and dealing with terrorist activity and insurgency has been tricky for both Afghanistan and Pakistan. When the Soviets invaded back in 1979, the incursion initially went smoothly. The capital city of Kabul was quickly seized with hardly any resistance, and only as much as curiosity from the locals. It wasn't long, however, before the Soviets realised that the intelligentsia of Afghanistan's cities weren't at all representative of the land's true nature, and like many who came before them, they found out that if the Afghans excelled at anything, it was warfare. The rebellion came in the form of the Mujahideen, a collective group of guerrilla fighters from numerous ethnic groups across the country, who fought alongside each other with the common goal of resisting Soviet occupation. The fighters managed to get hold of state-of-the-art weaponry, first from countries like China and Pakistan, and more famously the United States, who supplied some $400 billion worth of aid each year through clandestine CIA operations. The Soviets, who were already struggling in Afghanistan, weren't able to neutralize the Mujahideen's safe havens in neighboring Pakistan, where the resistance stored many of their supplies and weapons. In drawing his famous line back in 1893, Mortimer Durand essentially did the Mujahideen a service. The Soviets lost because they couldn't do anything about the ethnic Pashtun on the other side of the border. After all, they were trying to take Afghanistan, not Pakistan. And even after the Soviets withdrew their armies, the people still resisted control from any local governments. Armed fighters from all sides and ethnicities vied for power in Kabul, and the country soon devolved into violence and ultimately civil war. Afghanistan still remains a geopolitical exception. Its uniquely tribalistic society, the ethnic groups who all share a sense of nationalism when faced with foreign powers, and its formidable terrain mean that, over the years, the Afghans have learned to resist every kind of invasion, taking full advantage of not only geography, but supposedly irrelevant lines drawn up on a map over a century ago. I really hope you managed to learn a thing or two from this video. A lot of effort goes into making them, and if you haven't yet subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. Don't forget to also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.